Okay, here are my 5 people for my last speech. Alrighty. Tonight I want to talk to you guys about one of my favorite Bible characters in the Bible. Her name is Esther. And first of all, can you guys just imagine being one of the only 2 women who have their own books in the Bible? Also, can you imagine what it's like to be alive 2,500 years ago and still Hollywood is making videos about you? I don't know how many of you guys have seen the movie One Night with the King, I think that's what it's called. But yeah, also, for just a little minute, can you guys just put yourself in the position of a young teenage girl who was out one day in the streets, and then all of a sudden some police came and took her away from her family and her friends, and brought her into a palace of women, of hundreds of women that she'd never met before. And at this time she was put into treatments for beauty treatments and different things in hopes to win over the king. Esther was told that she was going to be taken, and if the king found favor in her, that she was going to be the next queen of Persia. So, for Esther, all of this imagining, it wasn't just imagination, it was reality. Esther was a young Jewish orphan who all of this did happen to her, but in the midst of all of the unknown, she had unshakable faith and courage and patience. And when she was faced with opposition, she stood her ground and she never once questioned the Lord's plan for her life. My first point is how Esther was a queen of great faith. From the beginning, they said in Esther 4:14, it said, "For such a time as this, who knew that this is why you came to royal position?" And that's true. Esther had no idea why she was brought to the palace, and she had no idea what God's plan and purpose was for her life. Faith is the act of believing in something that you do not see, which for Esther, she could not see God's plan for her. She could not see the reason, the ultimate purpose of why she was brought to the palace. But God ultimately knew what the purpose was for her, and so she acted on that faith, and she willingly left her home with her cousin Mordecai, and she went to go live in the palace. This trait of having unshakable faith is something that we all should hold on to, just because we cannot live a life without faith, because faith is what keeps us going whenever we do not have hope. So my second point is how Esther was a woman of great courage. It took a lot of courage for her to go before the king. Esther mentioned that if I perish, I perish. This was her answer to what her cousin Mordecai had asked her to do. She needed to go before the king. And back then, going before the king when you weren't summoned was that was what was happened to you. You would perish, or you would be killed. And so Esther knew that she had to go before the king in order to plead for the lives of her people. And so she wasn't summoned, but she knew that she had to do what she had to do. So she acted accordingly when she asked her people to set aside 3 days, and when they would fast and pray about what she should do and exactly when she should do it. So she planned accordingly, and this is just a great example for us to learn how to deal with our hardships, to go before God and to ask for strength and to ask for courage. And this is another trait that we all should admire and take hold of. And then my last point is that Esther is a great woman of patience. Personally, if I had this big, huge task on my shoulders, I know that it would be really hard for me to wait on God's perfect timing and to not act immediately on my own judgment. But Esther knew that God wanted her to do it all in His perfect timing, so she didn't immediately ask for the king's, ask for him to save her people from right off the bat. But she went and she invited the king and Haman to go have dinner with her 3 times. And on the 3rd time, it was then that she pleaded for her life and for her people's lives. So I know that it would probably be hard for me to have patience in that sense. But so in conclusion, even though Esther had no way of knowing why God did what he did, ultimately she just followed her heart and followed through faith, patience, and courage, followed what God had for her. And sometimes in our normal everyday life, God's going to call either you or I to do an unnormal task. And so what we do with that is up to our choices, because Esther needed the faith to obey in the midst of the unknown, and God gave her that faith. And she also needed the courage to go before the king, and even though it meant that it could have cost her life, and God gave her the courage. And then also she needed the patience to wait for God's timing, and God gave her the patience. So in conclusion, all of these qualities are true characteristics of a great leader and an example that we all should follow. So thank you very much.